It's really striking how often we're seeing headlines about people facing, well, intense online abuse just for putting a different view out there.
It really is.
Like
Yeah.
those recent cases, the Navy lieutenant's widow, the foreign secretary,
Mhm.
both just hammered with negativity online.
Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, if our digital spaces have kind of outpaced our ability to handle these sorts of attacks.
Yeah, exactly. And it highlights something crucial. These aren't just, quick online arguments.
Mm.
They have real, often damaging effects on people who just express views outside the mainstream online.
Definitely.
And that's really what we're getting into today. We're going to look into India's cybercrime laws, the ones we have now, and try to figure out if they're actually up to the job of dealing with these newer kinds of online problems.
Things like cyberbullying, hate speech, stalking.
Right, and that really nasty one, doxing. We're basing this deep dive mostly on a really interesting piece from The Hindu, India's struggle with cybercrime laws.
Yeah, so the idea is to really understand the legal setup we have, see where it's strong, but also, maybe more importantly, where the weaknesses are when it comes to these evolving digital threats.
It's crucial stuff for anyone online today, really.
Absolutely. And especially relevant, I think, for those preparing for exams like the UPSC. Getting a grip on these legal and societal issues is pretty key.
Okay, so these new age cybercrimes, as The Hindu calls them, they feel different somehow, don't they? Not just the old hacking or financial scams.
That's right. What's happening now uses the very nature of the internet, its connectivity, to cause emotional, psychological harm, often on a huge scale.
Cyberbullying, stalking, hate speech,
They're all part of this, yeah. The sort of disturbing pattern.
and doxing.
Yeah.
We hear that word a lot. Maybe just quickly, what exactly is doxing?
Sure. Basically, doxing is when someone digs up and shares your private information publicly, without your permission, obviously.
Like your address, phone number.
Exactly. Address, phone, where you work, maybe even stuff about your family.
Yeah.
And the intent behind it is usually, malicious, to expose you to harassment, threats, maybe even real-world danger. It's a silencing tactic, really.
That's genuinely scary, thinking about the real-world consequences. The Hindu article points out that women and minorities often get targeted more. Yeah. Why is that?
Well, the sources suggest they are targeted more often, and sadly, it often seems politically motivated.
And coordinated.
Coordinated, like planned attacks.
Yes. What might start as just online harassment can blow up really fast into serious threats of sexual violence, even death threats.
Yeah.
And the anonymity online, or perceived anonymity, can make people bolder,
And things spread so fast online, too.
Right, which just amplifies the potential harm enormously.
So we've got these evolving, often targeted threats. But what legal tools does India actually have? The Hindu mentions there isn't one specific law for online hate speech or trolling. That seems like a big gap right away. It is, yeah. It's a significant gap. So instead of one dedicated law, India's approach is more of a patchwork. It uses existing bits from the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the BNS, the new name for the Penal Code, as many UPSC aspirants will know.
Right.
And also parts of the Information Technology Act, the IT Act from 2000.
Okay, so pulling from different places, within the BNS, what sort of sections are we talking about?
You've got things like Section 74, which is about outraging a woman's modesty, Section 75 for sexual harassment, then there's 351 for criminal intimidation, 356 on defamation, and 196 for promoting enmity between groups. Those are the main ones in the traditional criminal code.
And the IT Act, what's relevant there?
In the IT Act, the key ones are probably 66C for identity theft, 66D for cheating by impersonation, and Section 67, which covers publishing or sending obscene material electronically. So there are laws that touch on these things.
It sounds like there's something there, legally speaking. But the Hindu quotes experts saying these laws aren't really enough. What's their main argument? Where are the limitations?
Well, the really key insight, I think, is that while these laws exist, they often struggle with the specifics of collective or ongoing online harassment, especially if it's not explicitly obscene or doesn't meet the high bar for a legal threat.
You mean like a pile-on, lots of abusive messages?
Exactly. Think about a coordinated campaign. Each individual message might not be enough for, say, criminal intimidation on its own, but taken together, it creates this awful hostile environment for the person targeted.
Right.
And the current laws find it hard to deal with that kind of systemic abuse effectively. It's like trying to swat a whole swarm of flies one by one. You might get a few, but the swarm just keeps coming.
That's a really good way to put it. It shows the scale problem. What about specific things, like online stalking?
The Hindu article makes a really important point there. The stalking laws under the BNS, they're gender specific, meaning they're framed primarily around, say, men stalking women. They don't necessarily cover situations of digital mob harassment or sustained targeting online, where the victim might not fit that specific legal definition. Online mobs don't always care about gender, right? So this can leave some victims without clear legal protection.
Okay, that's a definite gap. And for things like online defamation or intimidation, what makes it so tricky in the digital world?
Well, if you think about it practically, proving a direct threat or actual damage to reputation in a way that meets the legal standard, it can be really, really tough online.
Because it's hard to trace?
Partly that, yeah. The speed, the anonymity or perceived anonymity. It makes it hard to pin down who exactly sent what, and then to draw a clear line between that online comment and some concrete real-world harm. That link is often what the law requires.
And maybe the evidence disappears?
That too. Tweets get deleted, accounts vanish. Gathering solid evidence can be complicated.
The Hindu also talks about the government's power to block online content. Section 69A of the IT Act. How does that play into all this?
Right. Section 69A. It basically gives the government the authority to order intermediaries, like platforms or ISPs, to block public access to online information.
On what grounds?
For reasons like public order, national security, sovereignty and integrity of India, friendly relations with foreign states. Quite broad grounds, actually. It's a major tool for regulating online space in certain situations.
Okay. And then there's this idea of safe harbor for platforms. That comes up a lot. What does that mean here?
Yeah, so Section 79 of the IT Act generally gives safe harbor protection to online intermediaries. Think social media platforms, internet service providers.
Protection from what?
Protection from being held legally responsible for the stuff users post on their sites. The idea is to let these online services grow without making them constantly police every single piece of user content, which would be, well, almost impossible.
But it's not absolute protection, is it? There are conditions.
Exactly right. Platforms can lose that safe harbor shield if they don't follow lawful government orders to take down specific content, or if they actually know about illegal content on their platform and just don't do anything about it. They need to show they're doing their bit, their due diligence.
This definitely brings up worries about censorship, though. The article mentions concerns that Section 69A could be, overused.
That's a really critical point, yes. While the aim of 69A might be okay in some cases, there's always that risk it gets applied too broadly or without good enough reason, and that could stifle perfectly legitimate speech.
Wasn't there a court case about this?
Yes, the big one was the Supreme Court's Shreya Singhal judgment back in 2015. It stressed the need for transparency for clear reasons when content gets taken down. But the Hindu suggests these rules aren't always followed properly. They mention instances where lots of accounts were blocked without users really being told why.
And the platforms themselves are pushing back sometimes. The Hindu mentions X, formerly Twitter, challenging things legally.
That's right. X has specifically challenged part of Section 79(3)(b). Their argument is mainly that the law isn't clear enough on what counts as an unlawful act that would make them lose safe harbor.
So it's too vague.
That's their claim. And they also argue that, unlike Section 69A, there isn't a clear way to get a court to review decisions made under this part of Section 79. They see it as lacking important checks and balances for free speech.
And this whole safe harbor idea itself might be up for debate in India now, according to the article.
It seems so, yes. The Ministry of Information and Broadcasting is apparently thinking about possibly pulling back or changing these broad safe harbor protections.
Why? What's driving that?
Mostly, it seems, the ongoing headache of fake news and disinformation spreading online. There's a growing feeling, or argument, that platforms need to take more responsibility for what's on their sites and be more proactive in dealing with harmful stuff.
Let's circle back to doxing for a second. The Hindu brought up that Delhi High Court case from 2023. What did that case show us?
That case was really interesting. The court did order tweets to be taken down because they revealed a woman's personal and work details after she'd criticized a politician online.
Okay, so they recognized the harm.
Yes, they saw it as a privacy violation. But crucially, they didn't actually classify it as doxing under the law. Their reasoning was that the information, even though compiled harmfully, was technically already out there in the public domain in bits and pieces.
That seems like a really fine line with big consequences.
Yeah.
So right now, is doxing actually a specific crime in India? Like defined in law?
Basically, no. Even though it can cause huge harm, doxing itself isn't explicitly laid out as a statutory offense in Indian law yet.
So what can victims do?
Well, as the Hindu notes, victims might be able to use civil law, maybe sue for damages under tort law principles for the harm caused. But there's no specific criminal law that says doxing is illegal.
And how does the new data protection law, the DPDP Act from 2023, fit in here?
Right, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. It's meant to protect personal data, but, and this is a big but, it has an exclusion for data that's publicly available.
Okay.
The problem, highlighted in the article, is that the Act doesn't really give a clear, solid definition of what publicly available actually means.
And how could that vagueness be a problem for things like doxing?
Well, it potentially creates a loophole, doesn't it? Someone could scrape together bits of information about you from various public sources, social media, public records, whatever. Each piece might be publicly available on its own.
But putting it all together is the problem.
Exactly. Aggregating it like that and then using it to target someone, maybe through doxing, that can cause serious privacy breaches and safety risks. But because the individual bits were public, it might fall outside the scope of the DPDP Act's protection. It's a real gray area.
The Hindu also really stresses that even with the laws we do have, enforcement is often the weakest link. Why is that such a big issue?
Yeah, experts seem to agree across the board on this. Weak enforcement is a huge barrier for victims trying to get justice. There's often a real difference in how quickly government orders to block content get acted on compared to how slow and, frankly, frustrating it can be for an ordinary person reporting harassment and trying to get help.
So the system responds faster to government requests than to individuals.
It often seems that way, yeah. It doesn't always feel like the same urgency or effectiveness applies when a regular citizen is the one needing protection.
And there's a specific issue when it comes to gender-based online abuse, isn't there?
Yes, the Hindu points to a really worrying pattern. Victims of online abuse targeting their gender often face disbelief, sometimes victim blaming, just a general lack of proper institutional support.
So trying to use the law becomes even harder.
For many, yes. Pursuing legal action can feel like another trauma, sadly. It becomes this daunting last resort, not an accessible way to get justice. And that points to deeper societal problems mixing with the legal ones.
Looking beyond individual cases, what are the sort of bigger picture structural problems holding back the fight against cybercrime in India?
Well, analysts point to a few key things. There's the whole anonymity issue, offenders hiding online. Then there are the complications with jurisdiction, whose laws apply when crime crosses borders online.
Right.
And also just a real need for more and better cybercrime training and resources for the police, for the courts. These are big systemic challenges that need tackling for any real progress.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. Looking back at our deep dive, based on the Hindu's analysis of India's struggle with cybercrime laws, it really seems like we have a legal system trying hard but maybe struggling to keep up with how fast online threats are changing.
That sounds about right.
We have some laws that can be used, but there are clear gaps, especially around online hate speech, trolling, and definitely doxing. And then there's that tricky balance between government regulation, blocking content, and the risk of censorship, plus the uncertainty around publicly available data in the new DPDP Act.
And critically, that enforcement issue. Making the laws work effectively and fairly for everyone seems to be the biggest hurdle.
Yeah, a really comprehensive picture. Yeah. It highlights just how complex regulating online spaces is and how much need there is for careful legal reform to make the digital world safer and, more accountable.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening who are preparing for the UPSC, understanding these kinds of complexities is really vital for analyzing current affairs and policy debates.
Definitely. This affects all of us online. So for everyone listening, whether you're studying for exams or just trying to stay informed, we hope this discussion based on the Hindu's piece gave you some useful insights.
Yeah, and it leaves us with a pretty important question to think about, doesn't it? Given how fast online threats change and the legal gaps we've talked about, what specific changes, what reforms do you think are most needed to create a genuinely safer and more responsible digital India?
Some really important things to consider there. We hope this deep dive into India's struggle with cybercrime laws, using the Hindu as our guide, was helpful. If you have more questions or your own thoughts on this, please do like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. We really do value hearing from you.